Can you imagine having your entire life ripped apart in a single day? My parents left me nothing but a dilapidated cabin. My brother inherited $1 million mansion, and the woman I loved called me a pathetic loser before abandoning me for him. But what I found hidden in that forgotten cabin changed everything. It started with the news no one ever wants to hear. My parents, Elias and Kelly Nonick, had gone missing in the vast, unforgiving Alaskan wilderness. The lawyer's office felt cold, stark, not because of the temperature, but because it was where our family, what was left of it, was officially torn apart. My younger brother, Curtis, sat smugly as the lawyer read the will. He was getting a magnificent beachfront mansion in Miami, valued at over $1.2 million. On top of that, cash, stocks, several bank accounts, a king's ransom. And me? My inheritance was a dilapidated wooden cabin, rotting away in the middle of nowhere, just a freezing, forgotten corner of the wilderness. That same night, the woman I thought I'd spend my life with, Amber, looked me dead in the eyes, called me a pathetic loser, slammed her engagement ring on the table, and walked out. Not just walked out, but walked straight into Curtis's arms. It felt like the world had not just turned its back on me, but had actively pushed me into the abyss. But there was a twist, a secret that would echo through my very soul. When I finally dragged myself to that forgotten cabin, expecting only decay and despair, I found something impossible. Hidden deep within its creaky walls was an old, weathered map. A map that led to mineral deposits, to oil, to precious timber, a fortune worth over $500 million. I kept it quiet for a while. My father, a proud native Alaskan, had always taught me, money means nothing if it comes at the cost of nature. But then, during a moment of raw, painful mockery from Curtis and Amber, I snapped. Just one sentence, a single, impulsive slip of the tongue, and that $500 million secret shattered like glass. Instantly, Curtis and I were locked in a bitter war over this unimaginable inheritance. We didn't know. My parents, the very people we believed were gone forever, were the ones pulling every single string. So, let me properly introduce myself. My name is Francis Nonick, and I was born in Fairbanks, Alaska. There, the bone-chilling cold wasn't just weather. It was a constant, almost living presence. Our small, wooden cabin teetered right on the edge of the vast forest, where towering pines stood like silent sentinels, guarding the secrets of the land. Our home was tiny, just one room serving as both living and kitchen space, a single bedroom for my parents, and a cramped attic corner where I'd curl up at night. I remember listening to the wind howl and whistle through the cracks in the wood, and waking up with numb fingers despite burrowing deep into a pile of worn-out blankets. My father, Elias Nonick, was a proud native Alaskan of Inuit descent. He was tall, sturdy, with eyes as sharp as a blade and jet black hair tied back neatly. He was a hunter, guiding expeditions into the forest, then later working at a sawmill. The work was brutal, but he never complained. To him, labor wasn't just a means to an end. It was a way to prove your worth to this land. "The land is our mother," he'd say, his voice deep and steady, solid as stone. "You must respect it, for it sustains us, but can also swallow us whole if we betray it." My mother, Kelly, was his opposite. She had golden hair and a smile as warm as the rare sunlight of an Alaskan winter. She was European-American, working part-time as an office clerk. She loved me. I knew it in the way she'd stroke my hair at night or slip a warm piece of bread in my hand straight from the oven. But she also always supported my father's strictness. "Your father wants what's best for you," she'd say whenever I grumbled about chopping firewood in sub-zero temperatures. We were poor. Not the kind of poverty where you're starving, but the kind where every single penny had to be carefully considered. I remember following my father into the forest, a tiny axe on my shoulder, chopping dry branches for firewood. Sometimes I'd wade into the river, the water, so cold my feet would feel like stone, just to catch a few salmon for dinner. Once I even scavenged scrap metal from a dump to sell for a few dollars, just so my mother could buy extra salt or sugar. Back then, I didn't see it as hardship. This was just life. This was how Mother Alaska taught us to live. My father taught me everything about survival. By 4, I could start a fire with just flint and twigs. By 6, I could build a shelter sturdy enough for a blizzard. By 8, I could track a moose. He didn't just teach me skills, he taught me a philosophy. Never take more than the land allows, he'd say when we fished. Take only what you need to live, and leave the rest for tomorrow. My childhood was defined by those harsh days, where the cold seeped into every breath. I didn't have fancy toys or luxury trips. My childhood was the boundless forest, the icy river, and nights huddled by the fire, listening to my father tell stories of our Inuit ancestors, of wind spirits, and the mysteries of Mother Earth. Those years forged me into a boy who grew up fast, quiet, and reserved. At school, they called me Forest Boy because of my father's worn-out jacket, my calloused hands, and my refusal to join their noisy games. I didn't care. I knew I was different. While other kids dreamed of cars and color TVs, I dreamed of deep forest journeys, just me and the whispers of the land. This harsh childhood gave me a quiet pride, an unyielding will, enough to face any challenge nature or life could throw at me. But I never imagined the greatest challenge wouldn't come from Alaska's biting cold or endless nights. It came from my own family, from my younger brother Curtis, and from the unsettling changes that sudden wealth brought to our once humble home. When I was 9, our lives transformed overnight. It felt like Mother Alaska herself had finally smiled upon us. My father, Elias, who'd been grumbling at logs in the sawmill, caught the eye of a big mining company. They needed someone who knew every hill, every stream, every hidden corner of this land. With his razor-sharp eyes and a memory for terrain like a living map, my father was their perfect choice. The new job brought a salary we'd only ever dreamed of, enough to pay off her debts, enough for my mother to stop counting every penny. For the first time, we escaped poverty's shadow. We left Fairbanks, leaving behind that old wooden cabin, and moved to a new house in Anchorage, Alaska's biggest city. Our new home had a real fireplace, clear glass windows, and thankfully, no gaps for the wind to sneak through. After the move, my mother quit her office job and opened a small diner. Kelly's Kitchen was carved into its wooden sign, and the mouth-watering aroma of fresh bread wafted through the neighborhood. Customers, from locals to truck drivers, flocked in. My mother smiled more, her eyes lighting up every time she saw the cash register brimming. That same year, Curtis was born. My younger brother. He had golden hair like our mother and big, sparkling eyes like a summer lake. Curtis came into a world where food and clothing were never worries. He grew up in a warm house, with a room full of toys I could only have dreamed of at his age. I remember pushing his stroller, watching him giggle, as our mother handed him a brand new stuffed bear. I wasn't jealous, not truly. Curtis was my little brother, and I loved him. I cherished being the big brother, teaching him how to tie his shoes, showing him how to read the clouds to predict rain. But as Curtis grew, I started seeing the differences, not just between us, but between the very worlds we were raised in. I grew up in bone-chilling cold, chopping firewood until my hands were numb, absorbing my father's harsh lessons on survival and respect for nature. My father looked at me as if entrusting me with the legacy of our Inuit ancestors. Curtis? He never knew a night without firewood, never waded into a freezing river to catch fish, never heard our father's stories of Mother Earth. Our parents, busy with their new prosperity, didn't have the time to instill those same lessons in Curtis. Instead, they compensated with material things. New shoes every season, a shiny bicycle, even a small TV in his room for cartoons. Whenever Curtis wanted something, my mother would smile and nod. And my father, though still stern, couldn't bring himself to say no. He's still young. Let him enjoy himself, my mother would say when I questioned why Curtis didn't have chores like I did. Curtis didn't just grow up with abundance. He grew up believing everything in life came easily. At school, he was the center of attention. Expensive clothes, confident talk, as if the world revolved around him. They didn't call Curtis Forest Boy. They called him the Prince of Anchorage. And he loved it. He loved the praise, loved showing off his new watch or shiny shoes. Sometimes, when I looked at him, he felt like a stranger. I didn't blame our parents. They just wanted to give Curtis what I never had. But I slowly, painfully realized their indulgence had planted a dangerous seed in my brother's heart. Curtis didn't value what he had. He took everything for granted. Money, clothes, even our parents' love. Once I saw him toss aside a brand new jacket because it had a small scratch. "Mom will buy me another," he shrugged, as if it were the most natural thing. I wanted to say something, but stayed silent. I remember my father teaching me to mend clothes, telling me a man must cherish what he has, no matter how small. The differences became more pronounced as I entered my teenage years. I still woke early to help my father fix fences or shovel snow. Curtis slept until noon, then ran off with friends to noisy bars and parties. I still loved the forest, feeling Mother Earth beneath my feet. Curtis loved city lights. I lived by my father's ways, discipline, patience, respect for nature. Curtis lived as if the world existed only to serve him. Once I tried to talk to him. "Curtis," I began as we sat in the kitchen, "have you ever thought about learning to fish or set up camp like Dad taught me?" He just smirked. "Why bother with that stuff, bro? Mom and Dad have money now. We don't need to live like forest people anymore." His words cut me deep, not because they hurt, but because I realized Curtis didn't understand, and perhaps never would. An invisible distance grew between us. I still loved him, but I couldn't ignore that we were walking entirely different paths. I was a man of the forest, of Mother Earth, of harsh but honest lessons. Curtis was a man of city lights, of glamour, of things that came too easily. I always believed that despite our growing differences, Curtis and I were still family. I thought we'd always find a way to connect. Then Amber walked into my life, and I learned that love can be a heart-warming flame, but also a destructive storm that burns away every shred of trust. I met Amber one rare, sunlit summer afternoon in Anchorage. I was helping my mother clean tables at the diner, the comforting smell of fresh bread and coffee mingling with the chatter. I looked up, and there she was, Amber. Her brown hair gently curled, eyes as blue as a glacial lake, and a smile that seemed to light up the entire room. She walked in carrying a book, looking like she belonged there. "A black coffee and a slice of toast, please," she said, her voice soft but confident. I wasn't easily smitten. Fairbanks had taught me to guard my heart like a fire on a freezing night. But something about Amber captivated me. Maybe it was the way she absorbed herself in her book, or how she smiled at my mother, calling her Aunt Kelly with such natural warmth. Or maybe she was simply different from the girls who only cared about parties and new dresses. I mustered all my courage. "Good book?" I asked, wiping a table, my eyes on her. Amber looked up, a little surprised, then smiled. "Pretty good," she replied, showing me a collection of poems by Robert Frost. "Do you like poetry?" I shook my head, a little embarrassed. Not much for poetry, but I love the forest and what he writes about. The wind, the smell of earth, the shadows of trees. Those are things I see every day. Her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "A forest guy, huh?" she teased, playfully but kindly. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. You could say that. From that day on, we talked. Amber came from a comfortable, middle-class family in Anchorage. She had things I never did: summer vacations in California, piano lessons, beautiful dresses, but she never bragged. She dreamed of becoming a journalist, of traveling the world and writing about forgotten people. "I want to tell the stories of people like you," she once said, as we watched the river shimmer at sunset. People who live true to themselves, not chasing false glamour. I was drawn to her, not just for her beauty, but because she seemed to understand me. She didn't laugh when I spoke of chopping firewood in Fairbanks or how my father taught me to track deer. She listened, her eyes alight, as if she were living my stories. When I spoke of Mother Earth, of my father's lessons, she took my hand, gently but firmly. "You're different, Francis," she said. "You're not like those guys who only brag about cars or money. You have strength." Her words made my heart race. For the first time, someone truly saw me. We fell in love. Those days felt like my life had finally burst into light. I took Amber into the forest, teaching her how to pitch a tent, how to spot animal tracks. She'd laugh, loud and joyful, when she tried to start a fire and sent smoke billowing everywhere. I taught her to listen to the wind, to feel Mother Earth's pulse. In return, she taught me to open up, to share the things I'd always kept hidden. I told her about my harsh childhood, the nights by the fire, the quiet pride of surviving Alaska's cold. She'd hug me, whispering, "You're stronger than anyone I've ever met." But as our love deepened, I began to see a shift in Amber. She grew more ambitious, craving more than Anchorage could offer. She dreamed of big cities, prestigious newsrooms, luxurious apartments in New York or LA. At first, I admired her ambition, saw it as a strength, a fire like my own resilience. Slowly, though, I saw her start to compare. And agonizingly, the person she compared me to was Curtis. Curtis, now in his 20s, was the epitome of Anchorage's success. He drove a sleek sports car, wore tailored suits with glittering watches, and lived in a beachfront apartment our parents had bought him. A place with a balcony overlooking the ocean, where he threw extravagant parties. His friends were elite young businessmen, beautiful women. For Curtis, life was a stage, and he was always the star. Amber's gaze began to drift. She used to call me different, but now, when I spoke of the forest, of Mother Earth, or my father's values, her eyes would glaze over. She started looking at Curtis, my spoiled younger brother, with an admiration she'd never shown me. She was drawn to his glamour. One afternoon, walking along Anchorage's coastal road, I saw Curtis by his car, laughing loudly with friends. Amber stopped, watched him, then turned to me. "You see your brother?" she said, her voice tinged with an admiration I didn't want to hear. "He knows how to live. He knows how to make people notice." Her words were like a small, sharp knife. Not enough to draw blood immediately, but enough to sting. I tried to keep my voice steady, just as I would facing a cold forest wind. "Curtis has always been like that," I replied. "He has his way of living. I have mine." But Amber didn't stop. In the days that followed, she said things that pierced my heart. "Why do you live so small, Francis?" she asked once at the diner. Her eyes looked at me like I was a puzzle she couldn't solve. "You don't know how to enjoy life. You don't show off. Don't you see Curtis? He lives big, truly lives." I stayed silent, my hand tightening around my coffee mug, but I didn't speak. I just looked at her, seeing her eyes grow distant, as if I were no longer the man she loved. Amber's criticism became constant, not with blunt words, but with subtle remarks and disappointed sighs. "You lack ambition," she'd say by the river. "You could do so much more. Why don't you want to be like Curtis? With money, status, everything that makes people respect you." I wanted to scream that I didn't need anyone's respect, that I didn't want to be Curtis, that my worth wasn't in cars or beachfront apartments, but I only stared at the water, a block of ice slowly pressing down on my heart. To Amber, living big meant flaunting wealth, lavish spending, commanding attention. She wanted the spotlight. She wanted to stand beside a man who made the world turn and look. And I, with my old jacket, my rough hands from wielding an axe, my dreams of the forest and Mother Earth, couldn't give her that. The cracks began to form. They grew wider each day. Deep down, I knew they couldn't be mended. Amber wasn't just comparing me to Curtis. She was being pulled into his glittering world. She no longer saw me as strong, but as someone lacking ambition, living small while my brother lived large. I tried to hold on, tried to convince myself our love was worth fighting for. But before I could even try to salvage it, a greater storm crashed into my life, sweeping away everything I thought was certain. Then the worst storm imaginable hit. My parents went missing, leaving behind a void colder than any winter I'd ever survived in Fairbanks. I was 30. The news arrived on a cold winter morning, snow falling softly on Anchorage streets. I was at my mother's diner, cleaning up after the morning rush. The phone rang. A dry, emotionless voice said, "Are you Francis Nonick? I'm an officer with the Seattle Police. I'm very sorry to inform you that your parents, Elias and Kelly Nonick, have gone missing after a plane crash." The world stopped. I stood there, still holding the rag, but all the sounds, customers clanging pots, blurred into nothing. The officer continued, his voice steady like a report. Wreckage was found in the icy mountains near the Canadian border. No bodies, no survivors. We're still searching, but his tone carried no hope. I hung up, an icy weight crushing my chest. I didn't cry, not because I was strong, but because the pain was too vast, too cold, too real. I called Curtis. He was at a bar, loud music and laughter in the background. "What did you say?" he asked, distracted. When I repeated news, he paused, then said, "Yeah, okay. You handle it. I'm busy." He hung up, leaving me with the flat beep of a disconnected line. The following days were a foggy nightmare. Alaska couple missing in plane crash, screamed headlines. People who'd eaten my mother's bread or hunted with my father came to the diner. They hugged me, offered comfort, but I felt only emptiness. Amber stayed by my side at first. She held my hand, whispering promises, but her eyes were distant, already looking elsewhere. While I drowned in grief, Curtis was different. He showed up a few days later, impeccably dressed, new leather jacket, polished shoes. "How's it going, bro?" he asked, his voice light, almost insincere. I looked at him, seeing a stranger untouched by the pain. "Aren't you sad?" I croaked. He shrugged, an enigmatic smile playing on his lips. "Sure, I'm sad. But life goes on, you know. Mom and Dad would want that." I couldn't respond. I couldn't fathom his calm. Then I overheard him on the phone, right there in the diner, his voice brimming with excitement. "Yeah, the will's probably going to be read soon. Hopefully, there's something worthwhile, right?" My hand gripped the table's edge. A cold wind blew through my heart. He wasn't calm. He was already thinking about the inheritance, about what our parents might have left behind, while I still couldn't accept they were gone. Weeks later, the court declared them deceased. Death certificates, cold and official, a final punctuation mark on all hope. I didn't want to believe it. But the papers, with their red seals and judge's signature, left no room for denial. The community mourned. They brought us bread, salmon soup, wreaths, a memorial by the river. I listened, silently, realizing my parents belonged to this community too. But when the last candle flickered, I was alone again with a void nothing could fill. Amber's presence only deepened my pain now. Her comforting words felt rehearsed, her eyes always drifting. I kept going to the diner, wiping tables, answering customer questions, but my mind was lost in the forests I roamed with my father. I dreamed of them every night, my father fishing by the river, my mother smiling in the kitchen. But every morning, I woke to the cold truth. They were gone. I didn't know how to keep living. Then, on a gloomy afternoon, the Anchorage sky heavy with clouds mirroring my sorrow, the phone rang again. A polite, cold voice. "Francis Nonick? This is Gunnar Holmes, your family's lawyer. I need you and your brother Curtis to come to my office tomorrow morning for the reading of your parents' will." A chill swept through me. I called Curtis. "The will?" he said, his voice brimming with an excitement that made me shudder. "Great, bro. Finally, something worth looking forward to. See you tomorrow." He hung up, leaving me with a gnawing unease. The next morning, I arrived at Gunnar Holmes' elegant office. Curtis showed up late, striding in, a sleek black suit, perfectly styled hair, and a confident smile, as if he already knew what was coming. "Hey, bro," he said, clapping my shoulder, a gesture that felt like a mockery. The lawyer's meeting room was small, stifling. Gunnar Holmes, silver-haired, gold-rimmed glasses, sat at the head of a long table, a thick stack of documents before him. He looked at us, stern but neutral. "Francis, Curtis," he began, his voice steady. "Today we will read the will of Elias and Kelly Nonick. My condolences for your loss. As per your parents' wishes, I will now read what they have left behind." My heart pounded, not from expectation, but from the raw wound being reopened. Curtis, though, sat upright, eyes gleaming, as if he was about to receive a golden key. Gunnar opened the file, flipped pages, and began. His first words hit the room like a cold gust of wind. "To our youngest son, Curtis Nonick, we leave the beachfront mansion in Miami, valued at over $1.2 million, along with liquid assets, including cash, stocks, and several bank accounts." The room seemed to hold its breath. Curtis let out a small, triumphant laugh, unable to hide his satisfaction. Gunnar continued, his voice unervingly calm. To our eldest son, Francis Nonick, we leave the wooden cabin in the remote forest near Fairbanks, Alaska, where our family lived in our youth. He paused, looking at me. I said nothing. I couldn't say anything. The cabin, the place where I'd huddled in the attic, where my father taught me to start a fire, where my mother sang lullabies on freezing nights. It was now just a dilapidated legacy. Something no one wanted, no one cared about. I felt utterly disowned, as if all my efforts, my discipline, all the lessons I'd learned from them, were meaningless. Curtis looked at me, his smile wider, dripping with smugness. Well, bro, he mocked. That cabin's perfect for you. Force guy, right? I didn't respond. The betrayal burned. Not just from Curtis, but from my parents. The people I thought understood me better than anyone. That evening, I returned to my small apartment, carrying a heavy pain. Amber was waiting, but her eyes held none of their former warmth. So, how'd it go? She asked, her voice cold, as if she already knew. I recounted everything. Each word like a knife I drove into my own heart. When I mentioned the cabin, she let out a bitter, scornful laugh. A rotting wooden cabin, she said, standing, hands on her hips. That's all you got, Francis? Are you serious? Curtis gets $1 million mansion, and you get a pile of broken wood. I tried to explain, tried to say I didn't care about money, but Amber wouldn't listen. She paced, her voice rising. Don't you see? Curtis knows how to live, how to win, and you cling to that small life, holding on to your forest, your Mother Earth nonsense. But where has it gotten you? A crumbling cabin. She stopped, staring straight at me, eyes flashing with disappointment. You're a loser, Francis. You'll never measure up to your brother. Her words were a blizzard, sweeping away the last of my hope. I stood silent, watching as she slammed my engagement ring on the table. The ring I'd saved a year to buy. I can't live like this, she said, her voice trembling but resolute. I need a man who lives big, who does something with his life, not someone who just holds an axe and dreams of the forest. She turned and walked out, the door slamming shut behind her. Just days later, Amber went public with her new relationship with Curtis. My younger brother, with his $1 million mansion and triumphant smile. He was the man she chose. I sat in my empty apartment, clutching the ring she'd left, feeling as if everything I believed in love, family, loyalty, had melted away like snow under the sun. I'd lost my parents. I'd lost Amber. Now, I felt like I'd lost myself. In the days after Amber left, I was trapped in a blizzard, unable to see a path forward. Anchorage, every street corner, every face felt like a reminder of betrayal. I couldn't stay. I needed to breathe, to rediscover myself. So, I packed what little I had and headed to the only place left, that dilapidated log cabin in Fairbanks, the legacy my parents had left me. Everyone else saw it as rotting wood. I saw it as the last thread of my past. By the way, if you're still with me on this wild ride, make sure to hit that subscribe button. More unbelievable stories, and maybe even a few happy endings, are coming your way. The journey to Fairbanks was long, cold, a haunting trip back to my childhood. I drove my father's old beat-up truck through snow-covered roads, flanked by endless stretches of pine forest. Every tree, every hill stirred memories. The land is our mother, my father used to say. You have to listen, respect it, and the land will answer. I wondered if Mother Earth was answering me now, or merely punishing me. The cabin appeared as I turned onto a rough dirt road, smaller than I remembered. Its roof sagged, the wooden walls grayed by years of rain and snow. Windows caked with dust. Some planks rotted. The chimney looked ready to collapse. I pushed the door open. Hinges screeched like a lament. Inside, the air was cold, damp, smelling of rotting wood and earth. Faint light filtered through, illuminating the cracked floor. I saw the attic corner where I'd slept, the fireplace my mother tended, the small table where my father carved my name. Everything was as it had been, but now it felt empty. A house without a soul. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, letting the pain wash over me. I thought about the will, about my parents choosing Curtis, about Amber choosing him. A wave of bitter tears finally came. I started cleaning, swept away dust, cleared broken wood, wiped the fireplace. While fixing a loose floorboard, I heard a hollow sound, a void beneath it. My curiosity was piqued. I used my father's old knife to pry it up. And there it was, a small, hidden wooden compartment, a secret kept for years. Inside, an old metal box, rusted but sturdy. My hands trembled as I opened it. Within, a carefully folded map. The paper was yellowed, but the lines drawn in black ink with symbols in an Alaskan native language, characters my father had taught me, were still legible. I spread on the floor, the faint light from the window illuminating winding lines leading deep into the forest. Some areas were marked with a small triangle, mineral deposits. Others, a black droplet, oil. Layered lines, valuable timber. In the corner, in my father's familiar handwriting, a note. True value lies not in what you take, but in what you keep. I read it over and over. For a moment, I could hear his voice. I leaned closer, tracing each line, my heart pounding as the meaning crashed over me. These marked lands, if accurate, held resources worth hundreds of millions of dollars. A treasure beyond anything I had ever dared to dream. I sat there, silently, clutching the map, my life hanging in the balance. Part of me screamed to run outside, to shout to the world that I wasn't a failure, not the wilderness fool Amber mocked. That I held a fortune that could make me richer than Curtis, richer than anyone. But another part, the part my father had patiently shaped, whispered a reminder. Not everything that can be taken should be taken. The land is our mother, and she must be preserved, not stripped bare. My heart felt like it was tearing itself apart. I didn't know what to do with the map, so I brought it back to my Anchorage apartment, hiding it in a locked drawer. Every night, I'd take it out, stare at it, as if it could tell me what to do. I pictured selling the information, getting revenge on Curtis, proving I was wealthier than him. I imagined Amber coming back, her eyes sparkling with renewed interest. But then I remembered my father, who taught me Mother Earth is sacred, that taking too much is betrayal. I remembered my mother, who said happiness isn't in money, but in how we live. I decided to keep the secret, neither to exploit nor sell it. I would honor my parents' true legacy, even if it meant I remained just Francis Nonick, the man of the woods, nothing more. But Mother Earth, as my father once said, always has ways of testing us. A month after my parents' disappearance, I decided to hold a small gathering to honor them. I wanted a quiet space, just family and friends, to share memories, to feel their presence again. I chose my mother's diner. Her heart was poured into that place, and the smell of fresh bread still lingered like a piece of her soul. I arranged chairs, placed a photo of them on the table. My father's stern smile, my mother's gentle eyes. Familiar faces arrived, bringing flowers and condolences. Aunt Mary hugged me tight, tears streaming. Old Joe, who hunted with my father, patted my shoulder. I forced a smile, but felt only emptiness. Curtis arrived late, of course. Amber was at his side. My heart felt crushed seeing her. She held his hand, smiling lightly as he whispered something. I turned away, focusing on coffee cups, but that image clung to me like salt in a wound. The memorial began. People shared memories. Aunt Mary spoke of baking with my mother, her voice thick with emotion. Joe recounted hunting trips with my father, laughing about his terrible fishing. My turn came. My voice trembled as I spoke of nights by the fire, of my father's lessons, of true value lying not in money, but in integrity. Then it was Curtis's turn. He stood briefly, said a few words. Mom and Dad were amazing people. They worked hard to give us a better life. I'll always be grateful. He sat down. Amber clapped, her eyes full of pride. I searched for sincerity in his voice, but found only shallowness. It was a prepared speech, not from the heart. I wanted to scream, to tell him our parents deserved more than empty platitudes. But I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm. After the sharing, the atmosphere lightened. People chatted, ate. I stood in a corner, feeling utterly out of place. Then Curtis and Amber approached, wine glasses in hand. Well, big brother, Curtis drawled, mocking. This memorial's not half bad. But Mom and Dad would probably be prouder if you did something bigger than this little diner. Amber giggled, her eyes cold, distant, sharp as a knife. Yeah, she added. Their words ignited a fire inside me. I'd had enough. Enough of Curtis's taunts, Amber's scorn, the constant belittling. I shot to my feet, my voice trembling with pure rage. You think I'm nothing, don't you? The room fell silent. You think I'm just a failure with a rotting cabin? Well, I have something neither of you will ever have. I paused, my heart hammering, knowing I was going too far but unable to stop. I found a map in the cabin, a map pointing to mineral deposits, oil, precious timber, worth over $500 million. You hear me? $500 million. The crowded room went deathly quiet. The air was so thick I could hear my own heartbeat. Dozens of eyes blurred. Only Curtis and Amber stood out. Curtis's face paled for a moment, then twisted into a greedy smile. His eyes gleamed with suspicion and excitement, as if he already had the gold in his hands. Francis, he said, his voice shaky but eager. Are you serious? Or did you just lose it and blurt that out? Amber was different. She leaned back, arms crossed, a mocking smirk on her lips. Oh, come on, Francis. Another one of your attention-grabbing stunts? A treasure? Sounds like something out of a children's book. I didn't respond. My throat tightened. I just turned and left the diner in silence, ignoring the murmurs rising behind me. I had just revealed the biggest secret of my life, and I knew there was no going back. Curtis, with his insatiable greed, would pursue it relentlessly. Amber, with her cold pretense, would find a way to exploit it. I stepped outside. The biting wind stung my skin, and snow fell heavily on the road, as weighty as the gaze of Mother Earth. Everything seemed to be watching, waiting to see my next move. Just days after the memorial, the real storm began. Curtis didn't waste a second. The morning after, a letter slipped under my apartment door. The cold words of a law firm hit me like a slap. Curtis had filed a lawsuit. He accused me of concealing family inheritance assets. The legal claims stated that the treasure map was part of the Nonick family legacy, and I was intentionally trying to keep it for myself. I read it over and over, my heart pounding with rage, not fear. My own brother, who once held my hand as a child, who giggled when I fixed his bicycle, was now dragging me to court as if we were strangers. But Curtis didn't stop at lawsuits. He spread rumors like a toxic wind through Anchorage. Aunt Mary told me he was going from high society parties to family gatherings, telling everyone I was a selfish man hiding a $500 million treasure, the legacy of the entire Nonick clan. Francis thinks he can keep it all to himself, he'd say, dripping with feigned indignation. He's not thinking of the family, not thinking of Mom and Dad. His words spread like wildfire. Soon, the entire city seemed to know about Francis's treasure. Distant relatives circled like vultures. Uncle Carl, whom I'd met only a few times, called one evening, his voice sweet as honey. Francis, how you holding up? Heard you found something pretty interesting in your parents' cabin. He spoke as if we were old pals. Families gotta stick together, Francis. If there's something valuable, you should share it, right? Don't let people think you're selfish. I gripped the phone, trying to keep my voice steady. Uncle, I'm not keeping anything. It's just a map, and I haven't done anything with it. But Carl wouldn't let up. He laughed loudly. Don't play coy with me, Francis. If you don't share, people won't be happy. You don't want the whole clan turning their backs on you, do you? His threat cut like a knife. Others, friends, even strangers, reached out. A distant relative texted, suggesting I share the map's info for resource extraction, promising to split the profits. An old neighbor stopped me at the diner, clapped my shoulder, and said, Francis, do the right thing. Don't let people think you're greedy. I looked at their faces, once familiar, now twisted by greed. I wanted to scream that I wasn't planning to take anything, that I just wanted to honor my parents' wishes to protect Mother Earth. But I knew they wouldn't understand. To them, I wasn't Francis, the man of the woods. I was just the guy holding a treasure they wanted a piece of. The tabloid media jumped in like sharks. A sensational headline screamed, Alaska man hoards $500 million family treasure. The article was riddled with fabrications, calling me a selfish son, a disloyal heir trying to steal from my brother. Reporters loitered outside the diner, cameras flashing every time I stepped out. "Francis, what about the map? What are you doing with $500 million?" I kept my head down, pushing past them, feeling hunted. Every step, I felt the city's eyes, as if I were a criminal. Worse, the cabin in Fairbanks, my childhood home, became a morbid curiosity. A friend called to warn me. Locals were lurking, some even sneaking in to search for the treasure. I drove there. The sight broke my heart. The wooden fence torn down, windows smashed, the yard littered with haphazardly dug holes. That cabin, dilapidated as it was, had been sacred to me. Now it was violated. It felt as if Mother Earth herself had been insulted. I stood in the yard, snow falling silently, and it felt like the land was weeping with me. Amber, of course, didn't stay out of it. One evening, she appeared at my apartment door, wearing an expensive fur coat, her eyes soft, too soft, like they used to be. "Francis," she purred, her voice so sweet it sent chills down my spine. "I'm so sorry for what happened. I was wrong. You're not a failure. You have that map. We could do something big together." I looked at her, feeling like I was staring at a stranger. She wasn't back because she loved me. She was back for the $500 million, for the glamour she thought I could now provide. "Get out," I said, my voice cold as ice. "I don't need you, and I don't need your lies." Amber froze, her lips tightening, then turned and walked away, leaving me with a heavy loneliness. I was cornered like a beast surrounded by wolves. Alone, I faced Curtis's greed, Amber's deceit, and the relentless scrutiny from relatives, acquaintances, the media. Each day, the pressure grew heavier, like an unending blizzard. I began to wonder if I was wrong, if I should just give up the map, share it, live the big life they wanted. But every time that thought crossed my mind, I heard my father's voice. "The land is our mother, and you must protect her." I clutched the map, hidden in the drawer, and told myself I wouldn't betray my parents' legacy, no matter the cost. The tension escalated to a breaking point. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff with no way out. But I didn't know that just when everything seemed lost, a greater truth was waiting, ready to reveal the final answer. 2 months later, the inheritance dispute officially began. The Anchorage sky was cloaked in heavy gray that day, as if nature itself growled at the storm about to erupt. I stepped into the courtroom, my heart aching, feeling like a trapped animal. Lawyers stared, the judge was stern, and strangers gazed with morbid curiosity. Across from me, Curtis sat, his eyes sharp and cold, a confident smirk on his lips, as if victory was already his. Amber, dazzling in a gown, sat beside him, but her eyes avoided mine. I clenched my rough hands inside my father's old jacket, breath heavy, trying to stay calm. Deep down, I wanted to scream that I didn't care about money, that I only wanted to protect my parents' legacy. But I knew in this room, no one truly cared. The judge, a middle-aged man with a deep, stern voice, banged his gavel. Curtis's lawyer stood, his voice sharp and accusing. He alleged I'd hidden the map, a shared family asset, and demanded the court force me to surrender it for equal division. Francis Nanak has deliberately tried to monopolize an inheritance worth $500 million, he declared. He has not only betrayed his brother, but also the family and the values his parents left behind. His words were daggers, slicing deep into my pride. I wanted to stand up, to shout that I never intended to keep anything for myself, only to preserve Mother Earth. But my court-appointed lawyer told me to stay quiet. I looked at Curtis. He was smiling. That same triumphant grin from the day Gunnar read the will. Amber held his hand, eyes sparkling with pride. But I knew it wasn't for Curtis. It was for the mansion, the glamour. I bowed my head, trying to focus on my father's words. True value lies not in what you take, but in what you keep. But here, surrounded by greedy stares and accusations, I felt like I was losing. Everything I believed in felt meaningless. Then, just as the judge was about to ask his first question, the courtroom door swung open. A cold gust of wind rushed in, followed by murmurs. I looked up, and my heart stopped. Standing in the doorway, with a familiarity that simultaneously thrilled and hurt, were my parents, Elias and Kelly Nonick. My father, tall and sturdy, black hair tied back, eyes sharp as a blade. My mother, gentle, with golden hair and a warm smile, though her eyes now held a hint of sternness. The courtroom was stunned. Gasps turned to shocked whispers before falling silent. My father stepped forward, his deep voice resonating through the room. "We're not dead," he announced, "and we have something to say." I sat there, unable to believe my eyes. Curtis jumped up, face pale, mouth agape, as if he'd seen a ghost. Amber gripped his hand, her eyes wide with panic, as if she knew everything was about to collapse. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order, but even he couldn't hide his astonishment. "Mr. and Mrs. Nonick," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Please explain." My father stepped to the stand, my mother beside him, her hand gently on his shoulder. "Everything you've seen, the plane crash, the will, the map, it was all a test," my father began, his voice steady, just like when he taught me about Mother Earth. "We wanted to see which of our two sons was worthy of inheriting our ancestors' true legacy. Not money, not land, but the values we've spent our lives protecting." He looked at me, then at Curtis, his gaze sharp but not judgmental. "We faked our disappearance to see what you would do when faced with temptation." The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. My head spun, as if the ground beneath me was shaking. Curtis shook his head, stammering, "Dad, Mom, what kind of joke is this? I inherited the mansion, the assets. The lawyers said so." Gunnar, who had been sitting quietly, stood up, his voice calm but clear. "That was fake, Curtis. At your parents' request, I presented a fabricated will to test you and your brother. The beachfront mansion in Miami, the liquid assets, they all still belong to Mr. and Mrs. Nonick." Curtis was stunned, as if he'd been slapped. Amber let go of his hand, her eyes frantic, darting from Curtis to me, then to my parents. I sat there, my heart pounding, not from joy, but from a profound, heavy realization. My father continued, his voice low, powerful. "The map Francis found was also fake. Another test. The symbols and information on it were entirely fabricated. If Francis had let greed cloud his judgment, if he had tried to sell those secrets, he would have gained nothing and lost everything. But Francis chose to stay silent, to keep the secret and honor Mother Earth, just as I taught him." He then turned to Curtis, his eyes sad but not angry. "But you, Curtis, you let greed guide you. You sued your brother, spread rumors, and treated money as everything. You are not worthy of the Nonick name." Curtis bowed his head, unable to speak. Amber, pale as a ghost, stood up and stepped toward me. "Francis," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have left you. We can start over, right?" I looked at her, her eyes now pleading, but all I saw was deceit. "No, Amber," I said, my voice cold as ice. "You chose Curtis for money, and now you're coming back for money. I don't need you." Amber stood there, humiliated, then burst into tears like a child. The judge, still in shock, declared the lawsuit dismissed. My parents approached me. My mother hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You did the right thing, Francis," she whispered. "You're the son we've always been proud of." Curtis, now empty-handed, fell to his knees before our parents. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I was wrong. Please give me a chance." My father looked at him, his gaze stern but not unforgiving. "You'll have a chance, Curtis," he said, "but you must prove yourself worthy. Live a year in the forest as I did. Learn to respect Mother Earth. If you can do that, you'll have what you deserve." Curtis nodded, tears streaming down his face, and I saw in him a glimpse of the little boy who used to hold my hand years ago. That evening, back in the old wooden cabin in Fairbanks, where every weathered plank held a childhood memory, I sat with my parents. For the first time in those agonizing months, I felt truly whole again. The firelight from the hearth danced, casting flickering shadows. My father, with his rugged Inuit presence, sat in an old wooden chair, his sharp eyes softened with affection. My mother, Her golden hair, now streaked with silver, sat beside me, her gentle hand resting on mine, warm as it was when she used to stroke my hair. They told me their story, a story of survival, of love, and of unwavering faith in me. After the plane crash, my father began, his voice deep like the wind through the pines. We were stranded in the icy mountains. No phone, no signal, no hope. But I learned from your grandfather, from the Inuit before him, that Mother Earth never abandons her children if they know how to listen. He spoke of long, brutal days in the biting cold, building fires from tiny twigs, hunting snow hares to feed my mother, constructing a shelter from snow and stone to survive the storms. With every single step, he said, his eyes softening, I thought of you and Curtis. I told myself that if we survived, I had to do something to make you understand. True value lies not in what you have, but in who you are. My mother squeezed my hand tighter, her eyes glistening with tears, but her smile was as warm as a rare Alaskan summer sun. Francis, you are our pride, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, but bursting with love. When you were young, I watched you chop firewood, wade into rivers to catch fish, and I knew you were stronger than anyone. Not because you were taller or physically stronger, but because you had the heart of Mother Earth, honest, resilient, and never betraying what your father taught you. She paused, wiping a tear. When we decided to fake our deaths, I was terrified. Terrified that you'd hurt, that you'd think we'd abandoned you. But I believed in you. Believed you wouldn't let greed guide you, that you'd hold on to our family's legacy. I sat there, in that familiar cabin, feeling like I was back in those nights by the fire, listening to my father's stories of our Inuit ancestors, my mother's lullabies through blizzards. Their words were aflame, warming my heart, thawing the chill of those lonely months. We wanted to see who you were when we were gone. My mother continued, her eyes locking onto mine, etching every word into my soul. And you, Francis, you gave us the answer. You didn't choose money. You didn't choose glory. You chose Mother Earth. You chose what we taught you. You are the son we've always been proud of. My father stood and walked to the hearth, firelight illuminating his weathered, compassionate face. He pulled a small, intricately carved wooden box from his coat pocket, an Inuit pattern, a gift from my grandfather to him. This, he said, handing it to me, is the real map. You have full authority over this map, to exploit it or to preserve it. The choice is yours, but I trust you'll do the right thing, as you always have. I took the box, my hands trembling, feeling the entire legacy of our ancestors within its weight. I opened it. Inside was a different map, drawn on animal hide, its lines meticulously detailed. It wasn't just a map. It was a promise, a responsibility, the very soul of Mother Earth. I looked at my parents, tears streaming down my face, not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming realization that they had never abandoned me. I'll keep it, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I'll protect it, as you have, as our ancestors have. My mother came closer, hugging me tightly, just like when I was a child. My father placed his hand on my shoulder, his gaze steadfast, filled with love. And there, in the old wooden cabin, amidst the crackling fire and the warm voices of my parents, I finally understood. True value doesn't lie in money, in mansions, or in treasures. It lies in character, in how we protect our legacy, in how we live true to our deepest beliefs. I gripped the real map, knowing with absolute certainty that I would never exploit it. I would preserve it, as my parents had, as our ancestors had, so that Mother Earth would remain Mother Earth forever. So, tell me, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to choose between what seemed valuable and what truly mattered? I really want to know what you think.